Hey guys, today's story is about some roleplay that got a little too real. We'll be getting into some backstory before we get to the actual game that this story's about. Names are changed, obviously. I was invited to play in a group by my friend Sam. Sam and I had been friends for years. She used to come into the local hobby shop that I worked at in high school, and when I moved to attend university in another city, she also happened to go there, and we've always kept in touch over the last 14 years or so. But the major thing to note here is that we spent a few months as friends with benefits. It was a mutual agreement. Neither of us was interested in the other one romantically, and when I started seeing the woman who is now my fiancé, we stopped. No hard feelings. We went back to just being friends. And both my fiancé and her new boyfriend know that we had a history and didn't have any issues. It was also over 5 years ago, by the point of this story. So Sam invited us to join Rick's, her boyfriend's, campaign. My fiancé and I often play D&D together, but it was going to be on nights that she was busy, so I went by myself. There were two other players who were also a couple, Kate and Dan. I only loosely knew Rick, Kate, and Dan from the odd time that they were around when I hung out with Sam, or when we had an overlapping hobby night at the game store. They all played Magic the Gathering when I played Warhammer. The whole crew was very nice, and I didn't feel like a fifth wheel or anything. Honestly, the campaign started amazingly. Rick had a homebrew world. It was low-tech, almost bordering on steampunk without going over the top. Kate made an elven ranger, who grew up sheltered, and now that she was an adventurer, wanted to experience all the things, but had little to no social graces. Dan made a Triton bard, who often did stand-up comedy instead of just playing instruments. Dan actually did RP short skits that were hilarious. I made a tiefling sorcerer who was very meek and shy, and thought adventuring would make him stronger. Sam played an orc barbarian, who she described as having ripped abs, but also an hourglass figure and huge boobs. When one of your few defining character traits is huge boobs, there's probably going to be a problem, but Sam played her very well, being the party's party animal, but also that friend who looks out for everyone else. She often acted the role of showing Kate and my character the world, as we both played shut-ins. It was actually a great group, and they all really got into RPing their characters. I've never been in a group that stayed engaged as their characters so much. It was fantastic. Rick always made interesting combat, and engaging settings and NPCs that all had unique voices and traits, and all of the party members got to share the spotlight, and so on and so forth. Honestly, it was the most engaging campaign that I ever played in, which is probably why I ignored certain aspects as they arose. There were times at the end of a quest or dungeon crawl that we ended up back at the tavern, and Sam's character would often drink a whole bunch, and then flirt with NPCs. But more often with Kate's character, and not just in-game. Sam would actually sit next to her when they RP'd flirting, and the two would get more touchy than I would expect. Neither Dan or Rick would say anything. They usually just laughed and went along with it. I think I was the only one that found this weird. Usually when I play in other groups, we just fade to black before anything risque happens and just move on. They never acted out the sex, but they definitely moved into foreplay territory, and some kissing before we moved on. And it should be noted that I usually didn't stay the entire night. They played on weeknights, and I have to work early in the morning. So unless it was a serious dungeon or boss battle, I would duck out early if it just meant RPing back in town. It kind of worked with my character just being shy and heading up to the lodgings early. They would recap stuff for me like, "Kate drank too much and threw upon the quest giver," or "Dan roasted the town's mayor, not realizing he was in the crowd that night," and a lot of, "Well, Sam seduced ex-NPC," and that's all I thought really happened. One week, I took a staycation off work, so there was finally a night that I could stick around late during one of these shenanigans post-quest. I didn't know what my shy character would do, so I mostly just followed along with the group. I was expecting Sam and Kate to flirt a lot more, but it wasn't happening. I actually found Sam's character flirting with mine. She flirted with almost everyone, so I didn't think much of it. But she did lean into me and put her arms around me. The night went on, but none of the shenanigans happened like the ones that I had heard of. Kate and Dan eventually got up and said they had to leave early, which sucked because it was finally a session that I could play late with. I assumed that we were ending the night when Rick and Sam said I could stay and do some RP stuff, since I never got the chance. Awesome, or so I thought. We got back to the game, and Kate and Dan's characters left, so it was just Sam and I. Sam started flirting a lot harder, talking about how she was glad that I stayed up and we finally had some chance to spend some time alone and etc. She leaned in close while she said some of this. I just played it off in my shy and awkward fashion, both in real life and RPing-wise, as this was awkward and I wish I said something right at the start. I kept glancing to Rick, who just watched and didn't say anything, and I just was not comfortable at this point. I assumed that Rick would throw some sort of hook at us, but he literally just watched Sam flirt with me. I didn't even feel like it was in character at this point.
"I climb on top of your sorcerer's lap like this,"
she said, and then she just hopped onto my lap and straddled me. She started saying all the things that her character wanted to do to my character. Rick had been silent, but finally asked me, "What do you do?" Well, I imagine my character is just as red-faced as I am now, and just as awkward. I tried to tell them that I'm not comfortable, but they just assumed it was a joke and laughed. And Sam made some more sexual remarks about writing my character and so on. Yeah, okay, so, our characters just get it on and, fade to black, right? I say, looking with pleading eyes at Rick to end this. "Nah, man, it's okay. Just play it out, you're doing great." What? Sam leaned in, like this, and tried to make out with me. I got my hand up and pushed her away. I told them to stop, and no more RPing. Just what the heck is going on? We're role-playing. Just, you know, sex stuff like what Kate and Sam do. Okay, but I assumed that all of that was consensual and talked about beforehand. I thought the two of them had some sort of agreement or something, and yes, they've kissed and made out, but that's all. Right? Wrong. They went on to tell me that some of the nights after I had left, they roleplayed a lot more, and often did have sex. They claimed they forgot I was never around during those parts, and never saw it. They thought I knew what was happening, so they explained it to me. Sam and Kate did have sex. In real life, but in character from time to time. Dan and Rick always watched. I don't really care that they do this themselves. That's a mutual agreement between them. I probably wouldn't even care if it continued to happen, and I would just leave early like usual. However, they tried to include me, suddenly, and without anyone telling me anything or asking. And that's where I got upset. Rick tried to convince me to stay. He brought up my past with Sam. "It's okay. Nothing you haven't seen before. Or done before, even. I can just leave you and give you two privacy if you find it weird for me to watch." And at that point, flustered and angry, I just yelled, "I'm going home to my fiancé," and stormed out. I did go home and told her everything that had happened. I got a message from Sam apologizing for not telling me about it, saying that she thought I knew what was going on. She asked if I would still be interested in playing if they stopped with the sex stuff, but I can't trust them, and even if I did rejoin it, it would be super awkward. I just said that I was leaving the group and probably wouldn't talk to her anymore. I also wonder what would have happened if my fiancé did join that campaign too, as we were both asked to. But I wouldn't even bother asking them that question. Sam still tries to message me from time to time, but I never respond. I even stopped going to the game shop that we all went to. But COVID happened around the same time, so nobody really did. I really do wish things didn't get ruined with them trying to seduce me. I really enjoyed the game up to that night. I have no issues with people who have polyamorous relationships or do wife swapping or cucking or whatever, but I'm not a part of that, and don't want to be forced into it. Always talk about consent. Oh, Jesus Christ, guys. Wow. You know, with all the stories I've read, I didn't think I'd actually come across one that involved a polyamorous relationship, let alone one that got a little bit too close for comfort for the OP. Halfway through the story, I started having a little bit of suspicions, and it would have been nice for the OP if I was wrong in that case. Needless to say, always talk about this kind of stuff before you do it. It's also one of the few times where I can say that the RPing of the sex stuff actually led to real-life things. It's also a little bit of a yikesy for me, considering that they didn't ask the OP, considering he has a fiancé. But, anyway, that's the end of the story. Let me know what you guys think about this in the comments, and as always, have a good one, and stay safe.